agreements of compensation with their agents. In the past, both buyer and seller agent commissions were usually paid by the seller. Now, to help us better understand all of this, we're joined by the CEO of eXp, one of the largest real estate brokerages in the nation, Leo Pereja. Thanks so much for joining us. I know you just took the reins of the company last spring, so you're right in the fire, but let's get right to it. For the consumer, is this going to lower commissions overall, make them more negotiable, or just split up who pays them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what consumers need to focus on, it'll really change the process. So the 23 years I've been a licensed broker, the buy side was somewhat informal in the sense you met somebody in an open house, you had chemistry, they helped you buy the house. Now there's got to be an agreement signed and executed prior to touring homes. And so there is going to be a departure from the way things were done. And I'm calling it the messy middle because it's going to be both for consumers as well as agents, getting used to the new process. So we've already had anecdotal stories where a consumer calls an agent, the agent presents the contract, and they call a parent or a friend or someone who's bought a home before and says that's not how it goes. So I'm asking everyone to have quite a bit of grace as we maneuver these new rules. And sellers need to be aware that now when they list a home with an agent, they will have the option to still offer a buyer a compensation fee like they did in the past off the MLS, or they can simply say, put it in the contract and it can become negotiable. So there's going to be an adjustment period. But as you said, Diana, it's a lot of who's going to pay whom is negotiable on every transaction.
And there's been confusion, I know, as you talked about. I talked to a lot of real estate agents, in fact, some today, who say that things don't look like they're shaping up the way they should on the MLS right now. But for them, there's this concern that if someone's paying a buyer agent, not paying a buyer agent, and the buyer agents can't get compensation, that this will cause a lot of agents to leave the business. Do you see that?
I don't see that. So one thing to unpack there is this rule was the result of a legal settlement. That doesn't change an iota of what the value of an agent brings to the table. The average buyer agent in America takes about 100 hours representing a party, and that is not going to change. The listing side is still as intense for the consumers, both the agents in consummating the transaction. So I think there's going to be a lot more conversations about compensation. You know, we're all for transparency, so the more transparency that could be a part of the transaction, the better. But the amount of effort and representation won't change. I'm mostly telling agents to think about the buyers like the sellers. You will now need to do a presentation. There will be a competitive market. You could see a flurry of new businesses start up, as we've seen on the listing side for decades, where, you know, there are companies that do it for a flat fee. There are companies that do it for a menu of services, and there are full service companies that do it for a percentage. I fully expect to see folks do that on the buy side as well. But the fact that buying a home is the single largest investment the average American family makes. It's done probably an average of 3 times, and it's highly complex with a lot of friction. And on the seller side, where sellers have had the optionality to go for sale by owner or use different business models, consumers choose at very high rates, 80 to 90% of the time, professional representation. And I don't think that's going to change because we have a rule set.
And there's been this claim that it could actually lower home prices. That is because if the seller doesn't have to pay the buyer agent commission, and say on a $500,000 house, they would have been paying $30,000 in commission. Now they're only paying $15,000, that they might take that $15,000 off the sale price of the house, as in lower home prices. Do you think that's going to happen?
I think that's categorically false. I think the value of a home is dictated by the supply of properties, the demand from buyers, and the affordability index. As we saw interest rates retreat by about 1%, that'll bring some reprieve to buyers on the sidelines. But really, we have a fundamental lack of inventory in this country that comes from the financial crisis, where we didn't build enough homes for the financial household formation we've experienced. And sellers are always trying to execute the highest net to them in the shortest amount of time possible. And the buyers are always trying to get the best deal possible for the home that fits their family needs.